Guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Remi for those that are new here, and this is a sewing channel where we share sewing tutorials and style tips and basically stuff related to sewing. So if you would like to see more of this kind of stuff, then just hit the subscribe button down below and join the family. Thank you. So in today's video we will be making a very beginner friendly skirt and stylish skirt. So beginner friendly but stylish, yes. So a few days ago a friend of mine saw one of my tutorials that was the making of the bucket hat, and she's relatively new to sewing, like very new to sewing. So she sent me a message asking, oh, is this beginner friendly? And as much as I tried to make my videos very explanatory, I realized that for certain styles, because the bucket hat requires sewing circles, and we all know for beginners that can be quite tricky. I remember when I first started sewing, oh my god, I cried one day trying to hem a circle skirt. So circles can be quite tricky. So I started to think of very beginner friendly styles, and I decided to make a tutorial on this gathered skirt. It's very easy. All you need is your hip measurement and your waist measurement, because your waistband needs to be 2 inches shorter than your waist measurement, and then all our fabric cuttings will be based on the hip measurement. So yes, if you would like to see more beginner friendly videos, leave comments down below and I will try to just make this channel more inclusive for even people that aren't really keen on drafting patterns. So you need to decide how long you want your skirt to be. So for me, I'm going for 17 inches, and because we're having 2 tiers, I want the lower tier to be slightly longer. I want the lower tier to be longer than the upper tier. So I'm going to make the lower tier 9.5 inches and the upper tier 7.5 inches, and this will give me my 17 inches. So now we need to decide how wide you want your skirt to be. So for the width of the skirt, take your hip measurement. In my case that's 37, and add 12 inches. So the 12 inches already includes our sewing allowance. So 10 inches is to add to the volume of the skirt, and then the remaining 2 inches will serve as sewing allowance. So in my case that will give me 49 inches. Now I'm going to divide this 49 inches by 2, and that will give me, you can just fold your tape measure over this way, and in my case I'll get 24.5 inches. So now for the upper tier, I'm going to cut 2 rectangles 24.5 inches, one for the front and one for the back, and this way it's just, you save more fabric rather than cutting the whole 49 inches at once, because I want to do this tutorial in such a way that even 1 yard of fabric is going to be enough for this skirt. So I'm going to try as much as possible to work with just 1 yard of fabric. So now for the length, remember the upper length is going to be 7.5 inches. We need to add our 1/2 inch sewing allowance because we're going to be sewing the bottom onto the top. And then for the upper bit, we're going to add 1 3/4 inch of sewing allowance. This is going to serve as our elastic casing. So by the time we fold it over and sew and then put our elastic inside, so our elastic is 1 inch, and the reason why I added an extra 3/4 inch is because the 1/2 inch will serve as the sewing allowance to sew it down, and then we need a little bit of room so that our elastic can just sit comfortably. So the extra 1/4 inch will act as a little bit of room for the elastic. So basically, let me just run through this again. Whatever you decide for your top tier, add 1/2 inch for the bottom sewing allowance and 1 3/4 inches for the top sewing allowance. So for me that's 7.5 plus 0.5 for the bottom sewing allowance, then plus 1.75 for the top sewing allowance. So that means my upper bit needs to be 9.75. So I'll go ahead and measure out the 9.75, and remember I'm cutting 2 rectangles. Cut my first rectangle, then use that to cut my second rectangle. So I just turn it around to make it easier for me to measure. So I'm going to go ahead and measure the 24.5, which is the width of my rectangle for the front. go ahead and cut this out. And next I'll just go ahead and cut out the second rectangle for the back. So I still managed not to make this straight, guys. So our first tier is sorted. Now I'm going to move to the second tier. So for the second tier, we want it to be wider than the first tier because we need to gather it so it has that nice, nice design, that nice gathered effect. So now what I'm going to do is, remember this was 24.5 per rectangle. I'm going to multiply this by 1.5. So that means for the second tier, each rectangle needs to be 36.75. Now the second rectangle is 9.5 inches. I'm going to be adding 1.5 inches. That will serve as the allowance for the hem and the top. So 9.5 plus 1.5, that's 11 inches. So that means the length is 11 inches. That's my brother. The length will be 11 inches and the width will be 36.75 inches. So I'm still trying to work with 1 yard. This is where 1 yard stops. So let's see how that goes. So I'm basically going to measure 11 inches here. So I decided to just go with 36 because remember I'm trying to work with 1 yard of fabric. So I don't think that half inch will make so much of a difference. So I'm just going to measure 11 inches down. So now I'll go ahead and cut out the second half of the lower bottom. The second half of the bottom. So this is the bottom and this is the top tier. So you guys can see I was able to work with less than 1 yard of fabric because 1 yard is up to here. So there's still some left here and some left here. So if we were going to have a pocket, but like I said, I'm making this like still beginner friendly, so I'm not going to complicate it with the pocket. Maybe in another tutorial we will explore pockets. So I really love this fabric, so I'm really happy I was able to manage it because I will be making a beginner friendly top out of the rest of material and we'll be able to pair that with our skirt. But for now, let us finish with the skirt. So the first thing we need to do is make sure you match right sides together because we don't want to make any mistakes. So the first thing we need to do is sew right sides together. So I'm going to go ahead now and sew right sides together of the bottom tier and also right sides together of the top tier. So sew it this way, right sides together. Oh, so my needle broke. I had to get a new one and replace it. So what I did was I just used my zigzag stitch to just finish off the hem of the upper tier so it stops fraying. If you have an overlocker, this would be perfect, but I don't have one. Hopefully I can get one soon. So now I also joined the side seams of the lower tier together. So all we're just going to do is finish off the lower tier. This is easier to do. I find it's easier to do before I join it together. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up the lower tier. Remember that we left just half an inch of seam allowance, so don't use more than your seam allowance. So I'll just a tiny hem over here. Then for this upper tier, we are going to fold the 1/2 inch seam allowance. What's happening? Okay. Okay, I have the wrong side. So now for the first tier, what we're going to do is we'll start by folding over 1/2 inch out of the seam allowance that we left up here. So we're going to fold over 1/2 inch, and then I'll press it down. And after pressing it down, I will then fold over the remaining 1 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to measure. So what I should have here should be 1 so this is 1 1/4. I'll also press that down, and then I will just edge stitch this all around. So I'll press this down first and show you guys so you guys can really understand. So yeah, I've hemmed the hem. Yeah, I've hemmed the bottom and the top actually, so I did both. And here I folded the 1/2 inch in, then I folded the 1 1/4 inch and just ironed it flat. So this will make it easier for me to sew. So now I'll take this to my sewing machine and sew along the edge. Just sew it round, but I'll make sure to leave about 1 inch because that is where we're going to pass our elastic through. So I'll go ahead now, sew this, but leave about, so I'll leave the 1 inch by this side. So I'm going to leave about 1 inch here, but sew the rest round. And then for this, you want to go ahead and just gather. So if you noticed, I hemmed both parts. So I'm going to go ahead and just run a basting stitch around this area here. So just run a basting stitch about 1/4 inch below where I hemmed it here, and run that round because we're going to use that to gather the lower part of the skirt. So I'll do that now, and I've sewn it down. Now I'll just go ahead and measure what I have here. It should be 40 something. Yeah, 47. I'm just going to measure around, which is what we were expecting to have, remember? So this is about 47 1/4, which is fine. So now I need to gather this up to that amount. So I already run my basting stitch round. I'll go ahead and gather it. But before I do that, I'm going to just insert my elastic tape. So I'll make sure my elastic tape is 2 inches shorter than my waist measurement. So my waist measurement is 27. So I'm just going to cut an elastic band that is 25 inches. So this works just fine. It's not going to be too tight. So I'm just going to pin this way and insert it through this hole that I left here. So remember this place. So I'll go ahead and just insert this round. So just watch this because you don't want this to go into the skirt band. So what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to pin this down so that way I don't lose this second end. So now I can remove this, and then we'll sew this down. Just make sure the elastic is properly arranged in here before you sew it down so it's not twisted. So now go ahead and sew these 2 tips down. So after sewing it down, I'm just going to trim it properly because we don't want any bulge, so just trim it. Then I'll put it in, and I'll just adjust this accordingly, or I guess you can always do that later. And now I'll go ahead, spread this down and sew up the remaining edge. So first tier of our skirt is done. So here's the first tier of our skirt, and here's the second tier of our skirt. So now this is what we're going to do. I'm just going to line up the side seams. So this is another reason why the side seams were a good idea. Just going to line it up this way. So for this, we're going to sew right on top. So we're not going to like sew right sides together. No, we're going to sew it right on top. So I'm going to pin it down and just adjust my my gathers until I'm satisfied. So, and then show you guys, and then we'll go ahead and sew it right on top. It will also give you this nice decorative finish over here. So I'm going to do that now. So here I've pinned it down. I'll go ahead now and just sew. So I'm just going to sew along this edge this way and just arrange my gathers as I sew, so it's nice and neat. So I would also, okay, let me do that first before I show you people what I want to do next. Okay guys, so after sewing it on, this is what it looks like. It's really cute, even though for me this was actually a nightmare because my sewing machine struggles with layers. Like, it really struggles. So guys, like, this was not fun to do at all. I had to like sew and reverse because it just keeps skipping because of the layers, which is even like, this isn't a lot. Gosh, this sewing machine can be annoying when it's time to work with layers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out the thread that I used to gather it. So basically I'm going to go ahead and pick that out. But before I do that, let me just finish the skirt. So yes, I just wanted to tell you, you should definitely pick this out when you're done, so you don't have like too many thread lines just over here. It's not going to give it a neat finish, especially if you're using a plain fabric. This is a pattern fabric, so you can't really say, but I'll still pick it out. So there's just one last thing I want to do. I'm hoping this will be easy because this sewing machine, please just cooperate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out my waistband like this, and then I'm just going to sew in the middle. So basically I'll stretch it out and sew, like just sew a single seam in the middle. That will also just help us to make our waistband stay in place, so it's not like twisting and turning in its grave in itself. Yeah, and it will also give it a nice like effect over here as well. But just make sure that when you're sewing down, you stretch and sew. So when I'm sewing, I'll stretch and just stretch as I go along. So that's the last bit, and this really cute skirt will be ready. Stretch it this way, then sew. So I'm just gonna stretch as I sew. So here's the final result of the skirt. I really love the outcome, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment down below if you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Bye.